It's early in the morning. We're at the end of June in 2023. I just thought I'd do a walkabout in the orchard. It'd be nice to show everybody how the trees have been growing, how they're doing. If y'all remember, this little quince tree was girdled by voles or something. It's coming back. And I did verify that the new growth there is above the graft, which is really cool. Got lucky. You can see where I cut the tree off there. And now we got all this new growth. So I'm super excited about that. I thought sure that poor little tree was going to be a goner. It's coming back. New grafts this year look really good. They had some fungus issues, but that's pretty normal around here. And when these trees are really young, I've had a lot of issues with cedar apple rust. And then I think pretty much all of them have outgrown it, all the bigger trees. This Bartlett pear has pears on it this year for the first time. It's going to be a good year for pears. Got a lot of good shaping done. I took on the bigger trees, the ones from 2017, I took the buffer pads out from underneath them. It's pretty cool. The clover decided to start growing underneath these trees. And of course, clover is a nitrogen fixer, so I just let it grow. And I got to thinking about it. Those buffer pads were under there. I thought, well, if I remove those and let this clover go to seed, then that seed can land on that bare dirt where the buffer pad was, and hopefully, keep that clover going around the roots of them trees, and they'll shade the ground. And I think it's just a good natural solution for now. Not very many apples this year because I cut off a lot of fruiting wood doing the final shaping of these trees. But it's more important for me at this stage to get them shaped right than it is to get fruit. And I still haven't built or bought anything to sell them out of. I'm planning on putting some kind of a shed there by the road to sell them out of. So there's really no sense in having a good production year if I don't have a place to sell them out of anyway. I tried these fruit bags. They're not really fruit bags. They're you get them for like weddings, for little take-home gifts for a wedding. And I saw online people have been using them to cover their fruit, to keep the bugs from eating the fruit. And I figured I'd give it a try. So far they look pretty good. This is St. Edmund's pippin. This is Duchess of Oldenburg. I got it shaped pretty good. Probably ought to pull this limb down some. It's kind of crowding, but it's all right. It looks pretty good. And it's got a nice big apple on it right there. Really pretty. It's gonna be fun to taste these. I never did get a really good example of them. last year. I've only got 3 kids orange red apples this year. It's really disappointing, but it is what it is. The wine saps, only one of the wine sap trees has very many apples on it at all. This swar, I cut it all the way back to the ground almost because it had burr knot real bad around the lower limbs, and I just took some scion wood off of the original tree and grafted. I did cleft graft, a double cleft graft on that stump, and it took, one side of it took really well, the other side took decent. So when that gets a little bigger, I'll just cut one of them off and just keep the one main one. But that burr knot was all the way around the trunk, and I was afraid it was going to kill the tree completely. So at least this way I can save the tree. It set it back a few years, but I can save the tree. M111 is known for burr knot. My quail are singing today. You can hear him, sounds like he says Bob White. The Candy Crisp are finally making it out of the damage that they received from the deer. You see this one, I'm shaping it right now, but it's looking good. I'll show you this John of Gold. This one was basically a one-sided tree a couple of years ago because the deer ate it, and it put up this nice limb, but it was kind of aiming the other direction, and I've slowly been pulling it over to this side, and now it has a really good vase shape to it, an open center tree, and I think it's going to be okay. This is a seedling. I planted a seed from a store-bought apple. It's either out of, I think there was 3 different apples I saved the seeds from. Opal was one, Cosmic Crisp, Honey Crisp, and I think John of Gold, I believe. But we'll see what kind of fruit it produces. If I don't like it, I'll just graft it over. It's pretty healthy though. I saved the best seedling out of the bunch, the most healthy without, disease. I almost have the second permaculture row done as far as mulch. It's really close. I think I only have 3 or 4 trees at the end left to do, and I'm gonna get that done this year for sure. I grafted over these first 2 Honeycrisp trees. I grafted these over to a variety called Cherry Crush. If anybody out there watches Skill Cult on YouTube, he also has a website, skillcult.com. Really cool guy. He is breeding red-fleshed apples, trying to come up with a prize-winning red-fleshed dessert apple. And this is one of his varieties that he's developed. Now that, keep in mind, I cut this off this spring, and I grafted onto it a double cleft, and it's already that big. And then this one over here is the same thing, right there. Have a look at the elderberry. It's huge. We're gonna have a lot of elderberries to process. Look at those big, beautiful flower heads. I can't believe how much the elderberry loves this permaculture row. And there's a little honeyberry tucked under there. I had to cut the elderberry back because it was shading it out like almost completely. My little gooseberry start has a ripe gooseberry on it right there. Gooseberries, when they're ripe, they're not very sour. They're actually kind of sweet. Oh, the Chicago fig came back. I thought sure they wouldn't make it, but they did. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to ripen the fruit before fall, but we can always hope. Look at those elderberry. So beautiful. The serviceberry lived. That's the standing ovation serviceberry. Oh, we have chicory blooming. Chicory's supposed to be a medicinal too. A couple of the raspberry starts from Mom and Dad's raspberries have survived. That one's got a decent little cane on it. I planted a whole bunch of those, I mean hundreds of those, on the other side of these trees along that pasture down there. And I think I only have maybe one plant that's survived down there, and it's getting crowded out by the wild plum trees. But here in the permaculture row, I think there's 4 or 5 of them that actually made it. There's one here, but it's getting crowded out by that elderberry. I'll prune that elderberry back this fall, give it a little space. Currants are still alive. That one's a red currant. You can see the daylilies are blooming. The comfrey likes to crowd out the daylilies a little too much. I talked it over with the wife, and I think this fall we're going to go ahead and dig up some of these and move them around. I think it'd be better to have like one outside row, let's say the left side all comfrey and the right side all daylily. I think it'd just be better, because the way it is right now, it looks extremely messy, and the daylilies are kind of struggling for sunlight. Look at that sea berry. It's getting huge. I didn't have any berries on those this year. They're still too young, I think. Maybe next year. They say the berries come on the second year wood. So hopefully next year we'll have some. I kind of screwed up on that over here in this new row. I planted some starts off of those sea berries over here. You can see one there. And they're growing fine, but the two that I did were both female. And I got to thinking about it. The wind comes from the church there towards this area, and I should have put the male at the end, and then the male could pollinate the females easier, because they pollinate by wind. But hopefully they'll be all right. When I get that third row up there done, I'll put probably several males in that row, and that way the wind will blow the pollen into these two rows and we can have some good pollination. New for the orchard is Saskatoon, which is a service berry. I think there's 4 or 5 of them in here in this new row. They're tiny little plants, but so far they're all still alive. I'm still battling the horse nettle. I pull it out every time I see it. I'm gonna go through here when I get done with this video and pull every single one I see. It's so hard to get rid of. And also the morning glories. Well, here's a good example right here. Morning glory on the left, horse nettle on the right. Those are coming up through. See if I can get you a good view of how thick that mulch is. And keep in mind, there's really thick cardboard underneath all that mulch. There's at least 8 inches thick of mulch with cardboard underneath. And they came right up through it, just like it was nothing. That little elderberry's coming along. Now these elderberry here, I just took a cutting off of the ones in the row behind me and just shoved them in the ground. And that's it. That's all I did. And every single cutting took. I think it's because of all that thick mulch. It kept it nice and moist. Every one of them took. This apple tree and elderberry are sharing the same space. I put that elderberry a little too close. Lesson learned for the next row. You want things to be crowded because that shades the ground. You don't want the ground to be out in the bright sun all the time to dry out. And it's just healthier to have the ground shaded. But you got to be mindful of how much you crowd, because the trees need sunlight too, and if the elderberry takes up all of the tree's sunlight, that's not good either. Look at this chicory. It's huge. Strawberries are doing okay. It's been extremely dry here, like desert dry, and it's not good for strawberries because I want them to spread and they have to have a little bit of moisture to send a root down. But nothing I can do about that. The black currant has some fruit on it. That's a black currant right there. I like those black currant candies that you can buy. I might try to make some black currant hard candy. Oh, Viking Aronia. I have 2 of those now. That one is barely, you can see just a little tiny green leaf on it. These were those cheap buy in a bag plants, you know, that have just a tiny little root on them, and they're just not very good plants, but they were super cheap. That one's doing really good. I think it's going to be okay. But anyway, I've been really wanting that Viking Aronia, and I saw them and I thought, well, it's cheap, I'll give it a try. And if I at least even just get that one, I'll be happy, because then I can stool layer that and I can get more. This is a spirea bush that I transplanted from the house. My wife didn't want it up there anymore. I have a little volunteer oak tree right here. Must have had an acorn in the mulch. And it conveniently placed itself right at the end of the row. So I figured, why not? It's gonna go ahead and grow. It ain't gonna hurt anything. It's just right there at the end of the row, kind of like a row end marker. Looks like all of my grafts this year took. I got excited. I thought I had a bluebird using one of these nesting boxes. I saw him, he was sitting on top of the box. You know how they do, they'll try to have a mate check out the box. But I haven't seen him the last couple of times I've been out here, so it makes me wonder if they ever really used it or not. For one thing, it's kind of really out in the open here, and I'm sure they probably don't feel too comfortable about that. But once these trees get bigger, I think they'll probably use them. So that's about it. Y'all have a nice day.